Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to RATPAC. This is our ARRL Field Day 2025 update. I'm Anthony Luscre, K8ZT.
And I'm Marty Woll in 6 Victor, India.
So this presentation has probably about 165 slides, and we're not going to cover everything. So you're going to need this slideshow at tiny.cc/fd-2025, or you can shoot the QR code. We'll also have that available at the end. We're also doing a short poll. You can click on the link in chat, or you can type in tiny.cc/rpfd and put your information in on your field day operations. Before we get started, a couple pieces of advice. The first one is if you're a ham that's new to amateur radio or to field day, consider finding a local group and doing field day in your area and ask to join them. There's ways you can find out using the ARRL Field Day Locator. Again, as I said, there's links in here you can click on for more information. This will let you go out, find a map. You can go to your part of the country. I happen to be in the Ohio area, but I'm going to actually be in West Virginia for Field Day. And on this, you can see these little red dots. These little red dots are places that are having field day operations. You can hover your mouse over top of any of them, and it'll tell you the station call sign. And if you click on it, it'll give you more information, including contact information. So if you're just starting out and you want to find a field day group to operate with, check out the Field Day Locator map. You can also search for ARRL affiliated clubs in your area using the ARRL site or the QRZ club database.
And I will add to that, every active ham should try to attend a field day. There, as you'll see as we go along, there is so much you can learn, and not just operating the radio, but all about portable setup and so on. And meet some other hams who are generally active on the air, and it's a great start for any new ham.
This slideshow is an accumulation of over 5 years of slideshows, so it just keeps getting bigger each year. It's a collection of resources that you will need to read through after our talk, because as I said, we're going to be skipping some slides and some entire sections. What I've done though is I've created a link so you can jump to various sections of the slideshow fairly easily. You might have to move around a page or two after you get there, but this will get you more information afterward. So the purpose of the slideshow and the presentation tonight is to provide both clubs and individuals with ideas to encourage active participation in Field Day 2025. And Marty, you want to go ahead for a while?
Sure, sure. Let's talk first about, what are you trying to accomplish on field day? What's a group or a couple of people or an individual trying to accomplish? For some, they participate year over year and try to improve their score. The score is really based on how many contacts you make, and how many different bands and modes you use, and to some extent, your level of outreach and other non on the air activities that are qualified for bonus points. So some people use that as a measure year over year to see how they're doing. Some will say, well, I just want to make the maximum number of contacts possible. Some want to try and reduce their setup time or complexity. Some want to try a new gear or new modes or a new antenna. Many times the field day is less about how many contacts and more about what sort of visibility can we get with the public. How can we promote amateur radio? Um, it's an opportunity for newer hams, particularly those that don't have HF stations or more than a simple vertical for VHF, to increase their operating time and find out what's possible on those bands. And of course, everybody, you have to do this. You have to have fun.
Yes, and you can get the complete rules at the ARRL website, so we won't dwell on the individual rules, except for just letting you know there's a couple very minor changes this year. There's a little change in the go to station information and a little bit of change in the go to bonus points. Other than that, there's really no major changes. There were a couple changes over the last couple of years we'll just mention. There's some changes last year in the public location description and information on that. There was also some changes in GOTA, rather drastic changes in 2024. And 2023 had a couple major changes. Again, we're including these because one of the big ones is they changed the power levels for different stations. So those are all available in the rules. And really, a lot of field day is tradition. And traditionally, it's been a group-based activity for amateur radio clubs and their members. And a lot of us, myself included, as new novices, saw our first HF operation at our local club's field day site. And that's where I got my feet wet the first couple of years, and that helped me decide that I really wanted to move forward in HF at home and upgrade my license and upgrade my station. So it's really a good learning activity. It's sort of contest-like because you're making fast contacts with very short exchanges. There's a little bit of competition, and that's good, but it's not really a contest. The other question is it an emergency communications test? It's not really that either. You ask different people and they'll say a lot of different things. I like the quote from Stan K4SBZ. It's not a test of MCOM, it's a demonstration of MCOM. In other words, it's a PR event to demonstrate to the public what we can do not only for MCOM but for other activities of amateur radio. It's not a contest, but it can be a friendly competition. It's a great training opportunity for new hams, and it's a great opportunity for old hams to get back in the hobby and get on a new mode. A couple of years ago, I had 3 hams who have been to field day at least 25 times each, and they learned about FT8 and FT4, 2 of which said I'll never do that until they tried it, and then they were doing it. So that's one of the great things about field day, that chance to try new modes, try new things, to meet new people. For some clubs, it's a picnic, a camp out, it's practice, it's fun. Other clubs treat it like an emergency response. Other clubs treat it like a contest.
I will say my first quite a few field days were with uh, the old West Valley Amateur Radio Club. This is in Southern California, not related to the one in Arizona, and it was full of budding contesters, many of whom are now in the CQ Contest Hall of Fame. So it was a wonderful start, and it gave us a chance to really see how much we could coax out of a rented generator and a bunch of antennas that we put up in the woods.
So why is field day so different when it's just one thing? Well, there's a lot of things that influence it. Where you're at geographic wise and what the weather's like in your location have a lot to do with it. Some of the people down south think that field day is an absolute miserable environment, whereas some of us think winter field day up here in the north is kind of miserable. Group dynamics and demographics of your club members, the traditions of your group, the focus of your group, whoever's the chairman or the steering committee for that year, the goals of your group, the number of participants that are available. I know our club goes up and down depending on the year. The equipment and radios that are going to be used, the antennas you're planning on using, and some strategic planning and theories of success. So here's
Let
the
me
Podunk Hollow, here's the Podunk Hollow Amateur Radio Club going out to do their field day.
You mentioned strategies and so on. There are a lot of decisions that you have to make as you're planning your field day, and each one has some pluses and minuses. You do have the opportunity to set up during the field day period and operate an extra 3 hours, but frankly, most of the people are off the air by then. So I strongly suggest, unless you're just 1 or 2 people on a setting up in a park or a mountaintop or something, I suggest you set up in advance. There are a lot of reasons for doing that. One is you get to put up typically more effective antennas, and you can take your time as you're setting up your station, which is an element of safety, frankly. And also, you don't have you don't are not so rushed that you can't take some time to show some of the new folks and maybe even get them involved in how to safely put up a mast with a beam on it, or how to string a dipole, and how to route your cables so that it's not a trip hazard. All these things that a new person might not be familiar with, you can get them involved and help teach them the setup, because part of the learning process in field day is setting up a station where normally there isn't one. Now, I know that there is a class for operating at home and there's a class for operating from home with emergency power. And frankly, those have been building very rapidly over the years. particularly since the COVID rules went into effect. But uh, really operating away from your normal station where there isn't much in the way of infrastructure is that's the kind of practice that will help you when it really does come time to operate in an unusual situation, in a disaster, or for a public service event where there are no resources nearby. You're going to have to set up a location, and again, you know, you may get out a lot better on a mountaintop, but nobody's going to come and visit you. So again, your priorities are going to determine whether you end up at a public park where maybe you can't operate overnight, but you get a lot of foot traffic, or whether you set up at some remote location that's got a lot of room for antennas. There's one club, actually a collection of clubs here in Ventura County who set up at the Reagan Library, and that's a expansive property, and they have everything from HF through 10 gigahertz uh, at in the parking lots, up on the helipad, down by the entrance to the museum. It's a really excellent operation, and they work pretty much all battery with big antennas, so it's quiet, it's not noisy, and not a lot of gas noise, and they can talk to people. The number of transmitters, which kind of determines your entry category, your power level and your power sources. You're going to have to decide on that. And importantly, what approach are you going to take for antennas? Do you want a lot of gain so you're stronger and work more people? Or do you want to keep it simple, which means not only less setup time, but also less teardown time when you're done? And then how much time are your experienced operators going to spend operating where they're making a lot of contacts versus mentoring? Some of the people who are the best operators may also make the best mentors for the newer hams.
And I agree with Marty 100% on this idea of taking your time and setting up. Don't try and rush the setup. I find that that time really turns into troubleshooting time in a lot of cases. So that being able to set up a little bit early and get things going means that I have more time to troubleshoot problems and to show people how to troubleshoot problems. So it turns into a very good learning situation. So we're going to go through an 8 easy quick steps here. And we've already talked a little bit about planning. And we'll talk about how you pick the number of stations and some of those in the next couple slides here. The next thing you're going to need to do is think about antennas, and I have a whole link here with information on different types of portable and antennas that you might want to use for field day, and even some that aren't reasonable for field day. But it talks about wire antennas, vertical antennas, beams, magnetic loops, and there's information on each type of antenna with a number of resources. Again, you'll need to get all these from the slides, and you can click on this link for more information.
And by the way, when we'll talk a little later about placement of those antennas and selection of those antennas when you have multiple transmitters going in one location. That becomes a big issue.
Now, some people like to do field day en natural, out in the open, and I've never understood how you can do that because there's either sun or there's rain or there's wind, so you need some sort of shelter to really have an enjoyable time. I guess if you're going to do it for an hour or two, sitting at the picnic table works out okay, but it gets kind of tenuous at many times. You're also going to need radios, and you're going to need to set them up. You're going to need coax. You're going to need logging computers, tables, lighting. So it becomes a logistics affair also. And then once you get everything set up, you need to operate. Now the operation is actually where it's more like a contest because they're going to be quick contest style contacts with short exchanges. And my goal at my local club's field day is trying to keep the station on the air for as much of the 24 hours as possible. I always feel like if we're going to put the effort into putting up the antennas and setting up the radios, we might as well keep them on the air as much as possible. And that's one of the things over the years that our club has looked at. We've looked at what are the times when we have the least activity, and if it's good, that means we've had a good field day. Along with making contacts, you can earn bonus points. So we'll talk about all the bonus points, but you also want to make sure you eat and keep hydrated. One of the probably least fun parts of field day is one of the more necessary parts, and that's tearing down, stowing all the gear, and making sure that you can use it again next year. So you don't want to destroy the stuff, and you want to make sure you pack it up properly. So that's a whole art in itself. Once you're done, the last step probably won't take place during the field day weekend. It might take place a couple days later, and that's submitting your log entry. And there's a link here, and we'll talk more about uploading your information to the ARRL website.
And submitting your log is really nominal, because what you're really sending is summary sheets and certain evidence of earning bonus points. You don't actually send your log in. However, you want to keep a log just as you would in any other kind of operation. Somebody asked in the chat, the poll questions there, what's in it for an MCOM operator? Well, I'll tell you, there are a couple of things. One is, and a primary one that everybody could use practice on, is listening and hearing accurately some information that is unfamiliar to you. It's not the same 40 people that check into your net every week. It's call signs you may never have heard of. And they're going to be giving you alphanumerical information, and you need to get it down quickly and accurately. And, you know, that is a skill in itself. I know people who run public service nets, and they always have a roster on hand, and they look down and find everybody on the roster as they call in. To me, that's a waste of time. I start with a blank piece of paper and I write what I hear. And if you're an active contester, you're going to get used to that. And field days, one of the ways you can build that skill: listen, get it down, record it, and move on. And also, of course, you're going to be sending an exchange, and you want to do that crisply and efficiently as well.
So the next thing we want to talk about is this thing we mentioned, classes and transmitter numbers. So in the ARRL field day, there's actually 6 different classes, A through F. And each of these has additional options based on the number of radios you use, based on the type of power you use, etc. So let's go through some of these things real quickly here. But before we do that, let's look at what's happened in the past. So the 6 classes are listed on the side here, and Marty and I have gathered information from 2018 to 2024, and then we also have 2010 to get a little more historic data in there. And you can see the number has went up a little bit with one big bump here, and we'll talk about why that is in a moment. But the good news is the number of field day sites are increasing. Now this slide breaks it down with the number per class and the percentage that they make up of the total. And then we also group these first 3 categories. A is club stations, B are 1 or 2 individual operators in the field, and C are mobile operators. So these are all people operating in the field, and we've added those totals up. The next category, D, are home stations using commercial power, and E, home stations using emergency power. These are what we refer to as the non-field categories. F is an MCOM station, which is a very separate animal. As you can notice, we're talking less than 5 or 6%, so that we're not really going to look at. But we want you to look at this and notice in 2010, 66% of the stations were setting up portable and operating in the field. About 27% were non-field categories. Now, we all know what happened in 2020, and because of COVID, we only had about 18% field setups and 81% non-field setups. The problem is we're still lingering around 40% field categories and 52% non-field categories. And to bring it into stark reality, here is the numbers for field versus non-field categories.
So you can see that if you just look at the raw numbers above the percentages, 16, 17, 1800, fairly consistent from year to year over this long span for field categories. But look where all the growth has been. It's gone from the 700-800s to 1,000, still even after COVID, 3,000, 2,000. So a lot of the growth, and I would say perhaps a lot of the newer entries into the field day operation, are not getting out in the field. And that to me is a real shame.
And if you notice on this, even though we've gotten more field activity, we're still nowhere close to where we were pre-COVID. And I think Marty and I will both agree on this. It's much harder to learn all these things we're talking about when you're operating a non-field station, because you don't get the experience of setting up a station, setting up portable antennas, etc. So we'd like to encourage you all to get in one of these first 3 categories and be out in the field this year if possible, even if it's only by yourself as a B station. So So let's go through each of the classes. Class A are clubs or non-club portable groups of 3 or more persons. Okay? You can't use facilities that are set up for specifically for field day. All equipment has to be within 1,000-foot circle. And typically, it's the class used most by field day stations, especially clubs. 2023, the power was changed so you could not exceed 500 watts PEP as an A, and stations in D, E, and F categories cannot exceed 100 watts. Class B is probably the most confused class. People see the letter B and think battery, but that's not what it really is. It's 1 or 2 persons, portable, field day
Doing
setup.
everything.
Yeah. Most provisions are the same as Class A. Is it a battery? Not necessarily. It can be emergency power, battery power, or commercial. And in fact, these are all the 1 and 2B categories, because you can have any permutation of 1 or 2 operators and 1 or 2 radios and have emergency power, commercial power, or battery power. So B doesn't mean battery, it means 1 or 2 people, portable.
The first B.
Yes. Class C is mobile. The key to this is the vehicle, the setup needs to be operable when the vehicle is in motion. So you can't have a car parked next to a 50-foot tower. It won't be a Class C. It will change to a Class A or Class B at that point in time, because it's not possible of operating in motion.
Now, by the way, that doesn't mean you have to be driving while you're operating.
Yeah,
In
that
fact,
does
that's
not at all.
not particularly recommended, but you have to be in a configuration that you could put on your blinker and get on the road right away. You know, you don't have stuff hung in the trees or anything outside the vehicle.
And it is sort of a challenge. We think that mobile might be really easy, but getting a good signal out of a mobile can be a little difficult if you haven't done it before. So I have a bunch of links here that you can go through for more information on setting up mobile operations, not just for field day, but for anything. So questions came up during the COVID years and right after COVID. What happens if I just take 5 stations that are Class C, put them all in a 100-foot circle? Do they become a Class A station, or are they still Class C? And really, Class C is limited to 1 vehicle. You can't have multiple vehicles in the same group for Class C. Now, you could have 10 operators in a vehicle and 10 radios in a vehicle, hopefully a barge or something or a bus, but it has to be 1. It's limited to 1 vehicle for Class C. Once you start using external antennas, you're either a Class A or Class B, even though you might be in a vehicle. And even if all your radio stuff is contained in the vehicle, if you have an antenna that requires you to stop and set it up, you're Class B or A. So Class D are home stations operating from permanent station locations using commercial power. In the eyes of many, this is not really field day. Class D got a temporary rule waiver for the COVID years, and it's continued in effect till now. Before that, Class D stations could not work other Class D stations for points, but you are allowed to, and that still remains the situation in 2025. But what
And by the
changed?
way, I know that generated a lot of grumbling when that first went into effect. The first year it was understandable, but after that, people who went to all the effort to putting up a station in the field found that there were home stations working home stations. They were louder, and the league has since put a power limit on that.
Yes.
But still, they were louder. They had bigger antennas. They were all sitting comfortably and working one another, where the poor guy in the field is trying to get a signal out, and it's harder to compete with a well-equipped home station. So another reason to get more people in the field and fewer of them sitting at home.
Now, if you are sitting at home and you're using emergency power as opposed to commercial power, you become a Class E station. Class E is probably a better alternative if you do have to stay home, but it's still not quite the same thing. Now, note, if you're using computers or for logging, other purposes, you can use commercial power. You don't have to use emergency power, which I think is a little
What, the
That sort of
computer? Yeah.
strikes me a little bit wrong. But if your computers are used for any type of interactive communication, such as FT8, FT4, PSK, RIDI, etc., then it also needs to be computerized.
Because it's part of the transmitter
Yes.
receiver. Yeah.
Class F is for emergency operations centers. It's a special class. We're not going to spend too much time on that. There is no distributed joint station operation. In other words, five of my friends can't decide to set up their home stations and we all enter as one station. No, again, that 1,000 foot rule would eliminate that. What they did add in 2020, and they've continued to do, is if you're operating individual stations, you can aggregate it with your club's total, and there's information on that. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. And the next thing is you add a number to your letter, and that indicates how many stations are simultaneously transmitting. So if we have three transmitters, three transceivers set up at our station, we would be three. Now, if we have a fourth transmitter that we're not using until we turn another one off, we'd still remain three. So it's the maximum stations you'd have, and you need to stick to that number throughout the entire period of time. So if you were a mobile station in Wyoming with one radio, you'd be one CWY. If you were commercial station using commercial power at your house in Pittsburgh, you'd be one Delta WPA. Notice we use the section and not the state. So these are the ARRL and RAC sections, not the states. If you had a home set up with emergency power in Brooklyn, you'd be 2E New York, Long Island, and so forth. Marty's already talked about the strategic decisions as far as setting up. Other things that we're going to talk a little bit about is crossband interference, and just say when you want to start that, Marty. You want to do that now?
Sure, sure, we
Okay.
could do that. One of the choices you're making there is the use of power, and the 150 watt category is probably the most popular. But if you use too low a power, you get bonuses for being on battery only and under 5 watts, and we've done that. We've set all-time field day scoring records twice with our Southern Cal Contest Club doing that. But that's a real challenge for the operators, and certainly not something you want to put a newbie on, where they're sitting there thinking they're going to work everybody and they have 5 watts and can barely be heard because they don't know the protocol. And so, generally speaking, you're going to use a little more power, but that also means you're going to have a little bit more potential interference. You have multiple band stations going on, and most of our bands that we're operating are harmonically related, from one to the other, and that means the potential is there for interfering. Now, there are a couple of ways to get around that, um, and to minimize it. I will say, first thing, we mentioned antennas earlier. Your antenna layout can either help you or hurt you. Um, if you use the pattern nulls to your advantage. Let's say if you have a little tri-bander or a 3 element Yagi on 15 and you have one on 20, and well, if you're going to be pointing mostly in one particular direction, like for us in Southern Cal, it's easy. We put them on 70 degrees and leave it, and that covers pretty much everybody. Um, but you want to have them so that they're end to end rather than looking into or behind one another. That helps use that natural null in the pattern to reduce the signal level at the next station. If you have enough coax and enough space to do it, use physical separation between bands that are closely related. Sometimes you can use opposite polarization. You can get some isolation there. Um, but importantly, filtering is a real good way to solve a lot of the field day problems. Well, first use a good rig. There are some little do-all rigs that fit in your briefcase. The problem is they often aren't very good at handling other strong signals, even out of band signals. Um, there's a big difference between using an IC706 and an Elecraft K3, for example. Um, the latter is very robust, and we've actually used those on multi-op stations in the CQ Worldwide contest where we're all running a kilowatt or close to it, and we can manage to keep the interference down. So clean signal, both a robust receiver and a low distortion transmitter are good. Um, there are good LC bandpass filters that use combination of inductors and capacitors and so on to maybe isolate just one band, and outside the band the signals don't get through. Those are really good to use. And if you happen to not have them, another option is stub filters. You make basically quarter wave stubs out of coax, and you put them in a T configuration next to right outside your transmitter, or on the input to the antenna, say where the antenna switch is there, and you can get 20 to 25 dB of attenuation from unwanted bands. There's a whole set of designs on those filters. Uh, I think we have it. I think we have the slide on one of our
Yes.
prior talks, but you can make effective filters fairly cheaply. Remember that whenever you use either a stub
Able
filter or an
Fox. This
LC
is Able
filter,
Fox 5.
if you're going to change the band, you also have to change the filter. So if you're going to have a switch, but to say one station's going to be 40 at night and 10 during the day, well, make sure that if you've got a band switch, or a coax switch, the filters are on the antenna side of the switch, not the radio side of the switch. Um, so that's another way to take care of it.
And we have, here's all the links to go along with that. So we have all the links that Marty was talking about right here. So you can do some study if you want to, if you're interested in doing that. And really, it's really, we're not used to having other stations close to us at home. We're one.
Unless you're unlucky.
Yeah, unless you have a neighbor. So those are the classes, and you're limited by the number you choose. Whether you choose 1 or 21 transmitters, that's up to you. Oh, by the way, we forgot to mention one thing. Let me just mention, when we talk about the bands, we don't use all the amateur radio bands. We only use specific bands, the traditional bands that are used for contesting: 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, 10, 6, and VHF and UHF. We don't do the so-called work bands. We don't do 30 meters. We don't do 60 meters. So just be aware that that's what all the field day operations are on. Now, in addition to the number you can have a free station. You can have a free VHF station. If you're a Class A station, you're allowed to operate one additional transmitter if it's used on VHF and UHF only.
It doesn't count. It doesn't count toward your category number.
Yes.
But this is a great place to take technicians who want to get on and experience, maybe especially if you're operating from an advantageous, topographically advantageous location. Great place to get them on, and maybe all they have at home is their handheld or a mobile antenna they hook up to a cookie sheet for the local net. Now they can get up there, and maybe you've got a nice vertical or a small Yagi or a Moxon or something up there in the air, and all of a sudden they're working people way distant, and they realize, hey, there's a lot more out there than I ever heard before, and that will get them excited.
But wait, there's more. You can run one more additional free station, and that's the GOTA station. So in addition to the VHF UHF station, GOTA stands for Get on the Air Station, and there's a whole set of specific rules for it. Again, any Class A or F entry can, with 2 or more transmitters, can also run a GOTA station. So a Class C can't do it, a Class D, Class E, just Class A or F with 2 or more transmitters can operate this Get on the Air station. There's very specific rules for it. It uses a separate call sign than the rest of the stations. It can be operating on the same band at the same time as any of the other stations, which is also something you can't do. You can't have 2 radios operating on the same band and mode at the same time. There are some changes from 2023. We'll let you go through all the rules on that. If you have questions specifically,
Let me just
go ahead.
clarify though, for those not familiar with it, that the Get on the Air station is basically for new hams that have been on the air in a long time, non-hams like a visiting reporter or a visiting government official or a served agency member. uh, Remember, as long as you have a control operator with the appropriate class of license, uh, you can sit there and guide them through making a contact. And my experience is, when you do that for a while, pretty soon, especially the youngsters, they get the hang of it, and they don't want your help anymore. You just have to sit there and watch them. And uh, for somebody who's not familiar with it, something is helpful. It's called a point script. You have a set of little phrases that are printed out in nice big print on the front, and you point to which one they say next, and they get used to that routine after a while. So that's a good way to get them started. And again, you're going to be looking at making sure they're staying in the band, using using the appropriate mode or the appropriate part of the band. But you can let them have at it and give them as much or little help as they need.
We're going to skip over the rest of these. And we're going to talk a little bit about some things as far as setup and things go. And it's important to remember that safety is very, very important. And there is an ARRL safety checklist for field day, and this link will take you out to it. By its very nature, solo field day operation is a compromise in many ways with untested tools, equipment, and plans. So you even have to be more vigilant when it's just one person. So if you're going out just yourself and setting up, you need to be extra careful about that also. So not just in groups. We already mentioned don't rush, don't cut corners, and by no means do you want to go anywhere near overhead wiring. You want to stay at least one antenna length away. My rule is two antenna lengths away from any wiring. And remember, we're not just talking about wire lines. If you have light poles, if you have other things like that, they have electricity in them too, and they are potential for shocking. So you need to be careful. You also need to be careful with generators, especially gasoline generators. When you're refueling, they need to cool down to safely refuel them. And carbon monoxide fumes in enclosed areas can kill. So even a tent is an enclosed area for carbon monoxide.
Yeah. Let me mention a couple of other safety things. First, a few organizations may have a tower trailer or something they can tow along, and somebody may need to climb that. I've solved that with some innovative hardware for our club, but a lot of times you'll have to climb something, whether it's a tree or whatever. Make sure you have the appropriate protective gear. Uh, and when you have your antenna up on a mast or whatever it is, make sure that all tents, eating locations, everything else where somebody might be hanging out, sleeping locations, make sure they are all well outside the fall zone of each tower or mast. And that means you give it plenty of room, well beyond the height of that particular antenna structure. You don't want anybody parked there, sleeping overnight, operating, or eating.
And
Um,
this is a great place for that yellow safety tape. Mark that fall area so that no
yep,
one goes in there.
absolutely. And so you flag all your guy ropes and your cables and wires. Try to route them so that they're not trip hazards. Remember, people will be moving from station to station at night sometimes, and you want to make them as visible as possible. Keep everybody safe. Make sure you have suitable first aid resources on hand if you're not operating right near a fire station or a hospital. You may have to take care of some incidents on your own until you can get somebody to help or get help to you. So that means having adequate first aid resources, and that includes not only the supplies but people knowledgeable about how to use them. Anthony mentioned keeping the generator exhaust well away from any enclosed spaces. Also, make sure you keep your generator and fuel away from any dry brush. That's a particular problem here in the Southwest and maybe some other desert areas. You don't want to be you don't want to be starting fires that way. Make sure you have working extinguishers. People know how to use them. Remember the pull, aim, squeeze, sweep uh, mantra for running a fire extinguisher. Keep them near where the generator and fuel are stored. Make sure your fuel is in safe containers, and that's so you're not keeping them in in makeshift cans or whatever. Use properly sized and outdoor rated cables. If you're going to run AC from the generator to the various stations, it should be capable of being walked on, driven on without damage. It should be big enough that you don't have a lot of voltage drop. Make sure invest in some good heavy cables, and make sure that they are suitable for that outside activity.
So we talked a little bit about going out and operating the field, and you might say, well, I'm going to operate from home, but I'm not going to be a Class D station. I'm going to go out on the patio and set up. So there are some limitations to the spirit of the rules, and the AWRL has a frequently asked question thing on it. Really, if you're going to be operating on your home property, convenient access rules out the use of Class B. So setting up on your deck is not one thing. Now, if you have 40 acres and you go set up on the other side of your property, that's a whole different matter. We'll let you judge, but make sure you take a look at the FAQ for information on that. If you are operating Class B, one or two people, go boxes, very easy installations. One of the things you lose when you operate with one or two people is the ability to do big projects like putting up a tower, putting up big mast pipes, et cetera, et cetera. So just remember, if you're going to be a small group of people, you need to adjust your settings accordingly. And we have some information on go boxes, on temporary installations of stations. This is a perfectly acceptable way to do 1B. You've got a push-up mast here, a vehicle for the equipment. Not Class C, Class B. We're going to step over a few of these here. Just a couple quick pictures. This is me operating 1B in Montana on Acadia National Park 1B. West Virginia, where I'll be in this year, but not the same place. A yurt in West Virginia. Vermont. This is my first time operating 2B, 1B. Two radios on B Class 1 operator. I'm operating single sideband or CW on the right hand, on the one on the far left here. The other one in closer, I'm operating FT8. And here's last
Anthony,
year.
how can you be 2B with one operator?
Two radios.
Yeah, but does that mean you're transmitting? You're holding two mics at the same time, calling
No,
CQ?
I'm doing FT8 and FT4 on the one
Oh, okay,
radio, and I'm doing CW or phone on the other one.
got it.
So I am operating two radios. I can't do, it's not SOR2 because I'm not doing two of the same things at the same time. And then last year I had assistance. This deer actually came up and put its head right up behind me on the porch here. It scared me to death. So if you are going to operate from home, there are a number of things you can do with temporary locations. If you're planning to operate FT8 and FT4, and you don't do it all the time, please try it out ahead of time so that you know what you're doing, so that you're not causing interference and you're not having problems with it. And do remember that you need to make some changes to the WSJTX settings for field day or other contest. And I gathered together about a half a dozen slides that you can go through that talk about those changes you need to make and how you can do your logging and what you need to change in WSJTX. So there's a link here with that information if you plan on operating FT8 or FT4. If you're a technician and you're operating by yourself, you need to stay in your technician class privileges, or if there's two of you technicians out as a 2B station, what can you do? Well, you can do VHF. All the VHF is available. There is typically 6-meter single sideband activity and digital activity. There won't be a lot of 6-meter FM activity, if any. There might be some 2-meter FM simplex activity in your area, but it really depends on how close packed you are.
If you actually find a lot if you're in a densely populated urban area.
But if you're here in Ohio, you're not going to get much. And if you go out in the middle of this country, probably your best bet on VHF, UHF is going to be 6 meters, either single sideband and or FT8. You could do satellite contacts. The thing is, they suggest you only do one satellite contact to get the bonus points, not to tie up the satellites. You could do 10-meter single sideband, and this year is a great chance to do that, or 10-meter digital. You can also choose to operate CW on 80, 40, and or 15 meters. Remember, no FT8, FT4 on 80, 40, 15. Those are not part of the technician rules. And there's more information on technician license, Life Beyond Repeaters. This is a video I did for the YouTube for RATPAC a few years ago, and I'm going to skip over the rest of the technician solo. You can read through that if that applies to you. This is one of the big things about field day, and that's preparing club members, especially club members who don't operate on HF very often or don't operate in contest type settings, it's going to be very different than checking into the local 2-meter repeater or the local VHF UHF net. So you need to figure out how you want to do that. You can do online presentations, you can do how-to videos, collections of resources, checklists can all be helpful.
You could have some tabletop examples where you actually walk people through it without radios and have them respond and call and pretend that you were on the air.
Yes. And I'll have a listing also coming up here of some things you can do at real toilet paper practice exercises between now and field day. So here's some training information and resources you can use with your group. We're not going to really talk about the power this time so much. We've done this in the past, so you can go through the slides if you want that information on battery power, generator power, solar power. Just want to touch real quick, if you are operating in the field and you need to power a computer, especially if you're using batteries for the radios, one of these little power banks, they're called laptop power banks, like a phone bank, but they put out 20 volts DC, they have adapters, and I can pretty much run my computer most of the weekend on one of these type of devices, and they're not that expensive.
Yeah, let me just mention on that. You don't necessarily need 19 or 20 volts to run your computer just because
Yes.
that's what the AC supply provides. Remember that supply is there to charge the battery. Open up your computer, your laptop, look at the battery, and you'll probably find it's in the range of 12 volts, which means if you supply it with external 12 volts, you won't be necessarily replenishing the internal battery, but you certainly have plenty to operate with.
Yes. You do need to log your contacts, and for very small operations, you could do it with paper log. If I make more than a dozen contacts, I got to be on a computer. I just don't. Paper logging just doesn't hack it for me.
That's how we set our all-time records. It was all paper logging back then.
Yeah, I did that for years, and I just love computer logging so much. So, interfacing your if you are going to do computer logging, interfacing your radio makes it a lot easier. For me, it's an absolute necessity because I always forget to change the band and mode if I switch. So the radio fortunately does that when it's interfaced. There's a link here from Bob, N6TV. This is a presentation he did at Contest University. It's called Everything You Need to Know About USB and Serial Interfaces. So if you're interfacing radios, this is a must read, or you can watch the video of it here also.
Absolutely. But by the way, Bob was originally WN6TLV, and he was our 40 word a minute novice back in our field day times. And and he just went on from there. He's one of our CQ Contest Hall of Famers now.
I'm going to suggest you pick out one or two pieces of software if you want to do computer logging. N1MM is probably the most popular one. It's free, it's full featured, it supports most contests including field day. Some people find it a little overwhelming. There's information here including a presentation from RATPAC that I did on field day operating with N1MM. There's also some how-to videos here. Some more how-to videos here. The second most popular program is probably N3FJP's field day logging software. It's a commercial software. It's only $8.99 if you want to buy just the field day version, but if you're interested in contesting and you want to use N3FJP, for $60 you can buy all the contests at one time. So you might want to consider that. There's information on N3FJP here, more information on N3FJP. Some information here if you're going to combine N1MM and WSJTX. I have those details in that changes you need to make for field day. There are some older programs out there. I'm going to skip them. The scoring for field day is based on the number of QSO points. Phone contacts count as 1 point. CW counts as 2 points. Digital contacts count as 2 points. There is a power multiplier, as Marty mentioned earlier, 5 watts or less, but it has to be all of your operations has to be 5 watts or less. You can't just choose to do it on one station or the other and change your scoring. No, it's 5 watts or less for the whole
Frankly,
operation.
that's only either for experienced contesters or for backpackers who are carrying everything up to a 14,000 foot mountain.
Absolutely. Our club always talks about it every year because I always operate 5 watts, and they talk about doing it at the club, and I say, you don't understand. If you want to be a 5 watt or less operator, you need to do it all year long so you know how to do it. It's not going to hack it for a new group. The other thing you do is you also get bonus points. All stations are eligible for certain bonus points depending on your entry class. The bonus points are added to your score after the multiplier is applied, and that gives you the final score. These are some of the bonus points available. They depend on your class, so you can look at this little chart. For example, you can't get emergency power with D because you're using commercial power by the very nature of it. So some of these are blacked out that you can't get, but this is a little checklist. Publicity, social media, newspapers, visibility of your site are all things that are strongly encouraged for field day.
There are bonuses associated with
Yes.
each of those activities. Yeah. Before we wrap, let me mention that when field day is over, in addition to kind of putting your log together or your entry together, I would encourage all your participants to do a little after action report. This is something we do in MCOM when you've done a deployment or an exercise. You look and see what went right, what went wrong, what should we change, what should we enhance, what should we keep. So keep track of what worked and what didn't. Get comments from all the participants, encouraging them to write it down. I keep a pad right next to my operating position, and I'm writing my comments and observations real time as I'm operating. Make sure those are recorded soon or during the event or soon after, because memories fade. Um, and then use those comments in developing your planning for the next year. And with that, you can reevaluate your hardware, your layout, your strategy.
One of my favorite bonus point areas is an educational activity. And if you're going to be at a public place with a lot of people, especially youngsters, consider having educational activities designed for your potential audience. Last year at our local field day site, we had a large number of youngsters who really enjoyed the educational activities, enjoyed visiting the stations, etc. And I have an article here with links with ideas for doing that, including this little Morse code key made out of a clothespin and a computer buzzer that they got to take home with them.
Yeah.
So,
And for additional ideas, take a look at some of the science fair projects that hams do. Those could be good educational activities as well. I did one for the big maker fair in San Mateo, where we had a little 1.2 gig low power transmitter, a little beacon up in the shelves, and I had a spectrum analyzer and a couple of antennas that people could use to try and home in, find the signal, and see what happened when they turned it sideways. One was a circularly polarized; it was a helix, and the other was a loop Yagi. They're both round, but one's linear, one's not, and so they could kind of see the difference. That sort of thing. It doesn't have to be related directly to what you're doing on field day, but anything like that that would be suitable for a science fair is probably good for that public demonstration or education too.
and here's a bunch of resources. I'm the youth coordinator for the Ohio section. Here's a bunch of stuff, and probably the most important one is this last one. This is a way to give anyone who visits your site a free receiver to take home with them using online software-defined radios. So these are some other resources, including a loop that you can have playing on a TV if you want, about what is amateur radio, and a bunch of handouts. I like poster-sized handouts that we can laminate and have there at the site so that people can see them and read them. Each one has a QR code on it, though, so they can take that information home with them if they want to. So this is one on sending Morse code and translating Morse code. Notice they can shoot the QR code and take the information home with them. But we have these on 11 by 17 laminated sheets. They don't get wet, they don't blow away, we don't have to worry about how much paper we're going to need, and this is one of the resources. So these are all available on this link. You're more than welcome to use any of those. This is the submission tool. It is not up and running yet, so this is a screenshot of last year's combined with this year's header, but basically you have to put in the information to report, and as Marty said, you don't actually submit a log, you put in a report of your information.
It totals by total number of contacts by band and mode, for example. Anthony, we got some questions since we're running a little short
Yeah.
now. Why don't we go ahead and take some of the cues from
Yeah, let me
chat?
just go over this real quick. I just want to mention
Okay.
there's 6 different activities that are really prime if you want to practice with your group. If you're interested in CW, the CW WPX is the week of Memorial Day. AWL digital contest if you want to try a FT8 and FT4 in a contest setting. The ARRL June VHF UHF is a great place to try out portable operations, generator power, temporary antennas. And then there's 3 QSO parties. Great opportunities to operate single sideband or CW. Kentucky, West Virginia, and Atlantic Canada are all in June. There's also weekly activities. And let's go ahead and just jump to the end here, and then we're going to let everyone, we're going to go through all the questions, but there's more resources, including posters, handouts, etc., station operating activity, operating things like the ARRL section map, sections listings that you can have print out and have at your station. Here's all the sections listed by the call number. And here's all the sections listed alphabetically. So let's go ahead and jump into some questions, and we'll come up and go to the last slide. So I'm going to bring up the field day responses and just let you guys see what the posts are so far. We've had 47 respondents. 72% of the people say they're going to operate. Almost 28% of the people have operated field day for 20 years or greater that filled out the survey. But we have 2 to 5 years and 1 year make up about 25%. 54% of the people said they're going to operate group Class A, and then it's split up between the rest. The next biggest group is Class D or E home operations. As far as power goes, it's pretty even. It's battery power is edging out generator power, and commercial power is here, and then we have a bunch of other things here. So now we have the questions. So I'm going to go down through this list, and Marty, you pick out any ones you want to talk about.
Okay. Our club will be operating field day looking to get additional volunteers to join in. This is one where if you have, let's say your club puts on a licensing class, as people, pass their exams and are awaiting their licenses, this is a great time to invite them to the field day. If you have a Boy Scout troop where some of them may be licensed, or even if they're willing to get on, they get on the air station under the auspices of a control operator, those are good places to get help. Plus, the Boy Scouts are pretty good at setting up tents for your operating, so you get a little extra manpower along with it.
So do you want to handle why do MCOM groups and individuals shun field day?
Sure.
I'll say one thing. It's not really MCOM. So I'll start off with that.
It's not, but the skill, I've always said that everything you do in ham radio contributes to everything else you do in ham radio. My DX contesting from all over the world requires that sometimes we have to solve problems on the fly with suboptimal resources, because going home is not an option. You spend all this time lugging equipment and paying airfares and so on. So it helps teach you what to do when something goes wrong without just giving up and stopping. It also, as I said earlier, it will enhance your ability to copy things off the air, sometimes in suboptimal conditions, weak signals, maybe some distant noise, maybe background noise around you. By the way, make sure if you have more than one person operating, use headphones, please. It'll make everybody's life a lot easier. And so those are all key skills. And of course, recording, logging or making note of the information that you received and getting it back quickly. These are all skills that are just as useful in an MCOM situation as they are in a contest.
And I'm going to go in, and the question is how to help new techs, and I'm going to say any new amateur, enjoy field day. There's a couple things. The first thing is pre-planning. Start ahead of field day. Give them other experiences to operate. But for field day, make sure you set aside time so that you're scheduling them in. Don't let the people who always operate do all the operating. Whether it's using the go-to station, whether it's setting up additional stations, whatever your plan is, make sure you have a plan so that you can get people that are not as used to being on the air during field day, and make them feel wanted and an integral part of the process. Very important. Don't just have everyone come out and the usual people get to operate the radios and everyone else gets to watch. Get them actively involved. in the process. Um, what is the best way to operate during field day with regard to interference? Marty already mentioned a couple things. Uh, the other,
Filters, robust radios, antenna placement, antenna orientation,
yes.
and don't, try to make use of the bands that may be open. Remember, you don't know until you get on the air to see what's going on with the band. Don't just use the propagation forecasts. I went to one field day where they were all within one big park, and they were complaining about interference between the stations, and it turns out one was on 20 foam, one was on 20 CW, and one was on 20 digital. And well, there's your problem. Spread it out.
And I've noticed a really disturbing trend over the last couple of years, and that's people all thinking that field day is only 40 meters. Please, please, especially with the sunspot cycle where it's at now, go up and explore 10 meters. That's where the technicians who are operating from home, that's the only place they can operate voice. Spend some time in the 28.3 to 28.5 segment. Get on 15, get on all the bands that you can. Even though there's no bonus for operating more bands, try and hit them. That'll really make the field day a better experience for you and for
Because
other
the
people.
contact you make with the same station on a different band counts
Yes.
again. So and band, by bands we mean band and mode. I would suggest you make sure, if you have any CW operators in your group, make sure every station is capable of being operated on CW. Have a key that, where the plug fits the jack, and have a programmed keyer if you can do that, so that maybe your CW operator, when things go slow on phone, he or she can come over and run some CW for a while. I've done that quite a bit with our field day group. Now I was the only CW operator. Now I'm one of two, and I can take a band where they've kind of run out of contacts and get a whole fresh batch. So make that easy to switch over.
And Marty reminded me of one really important thing when he mentioned a cable that fits the radio. I strongly suggest that you set up each of your stations before field day, away from your regular shack. Set up a separate table, hook up everything, run an antenna over to it, and make sure everything works and you have all the cables. Then pack it up. Don't put it back by the shack again. Pack it up and make sure it works. Don't forget things like splitters so two people can use the headphone jacks at the same time. Make sure you have adapters to go from quarter inch to eighth inch. Make sure you have RCA to whatever. Make sure that you have any type of adapter you're going to need. And the way to do that is set up the full station ahead of time. Computer, radio, everything, headphones, key, etc. Operate it, make a few contacts, and then pack it. And I talked a lot about this. If you go to the RATPAC site, there was a presentation on portable operations that I did a while back, and then there was just one from Thomas Witherspoon this last Wednesday. Take a look at both of those on portable operations for some ideas of packing to go out the field day. How can let's see, how can I clone myself? We already talked about that one. How can new hams be useful operating with a group club? They are integral to the process. And the more you get them involved, the more likely they are to be a long-term asset to your club. Get them involved in every aspect of setting up the station, setting up the antennas, getting them on the air.
Bring them into the planning meetings.
Yes, don't wait until field day itself to get them started.
Yeah. Um, uh, let's see. Somebody in chat, by the way, asked, can you use a setup that you have in an RV, like a travel trailer that you always pull with no external connections? Yeah, you certainly can. If you're going to use it that way, the same way you would roll down the road your Class C, if you decide you want to stop and throw up a low band dipole because the one you have on the RV isn't too efficient on the low bands, you can go Class B, either way. But yes.
Let's see.
Bandpass filters we talked about, I
Yes.
think. Um,
Yeah, we answered that one.
yeah.
Why does an AWL call it a contest? Because it's not really. I mean, it's contest-like, but there's really so much more to it. It's more. We want it to be a learning experience, and if we called it a contest, everyone would just have their best operators in front of the radios the entire time, and there would be less learning and more contacts, maybe,
And
but
remember,
less learning.
there are a lot of participants that are not at all in it for the contest. They're in it. For them, it's primarily a PR opportunity.
Yes.
So And when you look at the rules and you look at the all the bonus points, the very few bonus points for having somebody sit there rack off a lot of contacts. That's in the basic score. The bonus points are for the other activities that they want you to participate in.
And to tell you the truth, many of the operators don't operate enough to really be an effective contesting organization. So it would limit who you would have in front of the radio. Why don't they put the 3 hour setup and contact in front of the start instead of at the end? I'm really a firm believer that they should just do away with the whole 3 hour thing, because I've been doing this for 40 plus years and I've never made a contact in that last 3 hours.
And the few
even when I
times,
set
the
up.
one or two times we did set up, starting at 0 hour, when we kept going after the 11 o'clock Sunday morning or whatever the time is in your time zone, uh, we, we had people yelling at us, "It's over! It's over!"
Yes,
Well, so and the productivity there is really low, so you get very little benefit from that. So whether it's the beginning or the end, everybody looks at it as a 24-hour event, pretty much.
it needs to be that rule needs to be put to bed, like a couple other rules.
Yeah.
So what we'd like to do now is any questions from the group, you can put them in chat. You can raise your hand.
I want to
Um,
point out, by the way, Tom uh, back east reminded us that the rules are very different for operating generators on tribal lands. They're much stricter in terms of spill containment areas and the nature of the extinguisher and the separation from flammable vegetation, and that there are some big hefty fines if you don't follow that. So if you are thinking about being on tribal land, check absolutely into those rules and make sure you follow them to the letter. Thanks,
That goes
Tom,
in
for that.
state lands as well.
Okay, should
yes.
we end the screen share
Uh,
so we can see people?
yeah. Let me just go real quickly to the end here, because we have the beginner's guide to VHF and UHF, but we also have the beginner's guide to HF that Dennis and I did. These are 5+ hours of RATPAC information. And there's also a set that I put together recently on making single sideband contacts, digital contacts, and CW contacts. Share these with your group ahead of time. They can watch the videos, put them out, let people start getting an idea. These are good basic information for people to know before they come out. So do these. And again, this is the link. You can shoot it with your phone. You can type down this code. We'll also have it available on the recording. So we need you to read the rest of the show. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share. So we can see people and we can answer questions. So go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions,
Let's
comments,
go back to a gallery
suggestions.
view. Tom, get your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Just wanted to point out, apropos of scouts, the year before last, the Montgomery Amateur Radio Club qualified 80 scouts for their radio merit badge. And I'm sorry, 2 years ago. And last year they did 120 scouts.
My goodness.
Parents drove down from Massachusetts and New York and up from Georgia because their kid was near the end of the road for merit badges, and they could get, plus you can qualify them for the activity part of participating in an emergency exercise. Field day does qualify, and there's also a firemanship that if you have a qualified person, they can clean that off during a field day. And there, for Anthony's guidance, is where you're on-site educational activity, because we have a PowerPoint that people have put together. No credit to me. I mean, other members of the club have put together to walk the scouts through answering their questions and filling out their stuff. They do it themselves, but we give them the direct guidance so they can just roll right along. And
Wow, fantastic,
That's
fantastic.
great.
And you've got enough GOTA operators to fill up that log.
oh yeah, 1 year we threw up an AB 143 or something vertical and put the GOTA station on it, so it's totally out of phase with the other antennas. We had scouts lined up 25 deep, and in a way for them, since they don't need 20 contacts, the GOTA rules are So we didn't worry about the go-to rules about how many contacts you could. We just got scouts through there. We just forewent asking for 20 contacts, and we got them through there with what they needed rather than what we might have liked. And it's very rewarding. The scouts are thrilled and their parents are thrilled. So,
Wow, that's great. Nice work.
way to make a good showing for amateur radio to the public.
Tom, and that's great. And that reminds me of two things. One is when you go to those resources, I have one specifically for scouting. That's some handouts that we did for a scouting group. The other thing is if you have any type of materials at your site, consider putting shortcut URLs and QR codes on them so everyone can bring the stuff home with them. The nice thing about that is if you use a site to create the shortcut URLs, you'll be able to see how many people go back to the materials throughout the year, which is very interesting. So if you are doing things, I found that over the years, we've totally abandoned paper handouts. We have everything with QR codes so they can shoot them with their phone, take them home, and we can see how much they're accessed after the event. Let's see. Other questions? Raise your hand. We'll be happy to.
Barry, do you see any other questions in chat?
Nope, you've covered everything that was in chat.
I just want to add a couple of things to the safety bundle.
Yes.
When you're refueling, have an extinguisher person who actually knows how to use the extinguisher as your fire guard while you're refueling. If a flash fire occurs, it could save your life. And flash fires can generate some disfiguring burns. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. The second thing is, if you're using manufactured gas, LP, petroleum, propane, to run a generator, realize that if that stuff leaks, it will flow but like water right along the ground until it finds itself something hot to ignite off of. And the spread of the flame front through propane gas is faster than an Olympic runner can run. It's that quick. You don't want to be in that cloud. So the propane should always be downhill if possible from where you are. So it will flow away from the operation and away from the ignition sources. And a great way to do safer refueling is to have an overboard fuel tank that can be carried away from the generator while it's still operating. 25 feet away is perfectly safe. Refuel, come back, reconnect it. You never interrupted your power.
And there are some tank and lid arrangements that you can use that basically all the filling is done in the external tank, and it just uses suction to keep the generator running. And by the way, we talked about power. In my experience, I run typically a 100-watt CW station, and I found that a 100 amp hour good lithium iron phosphate battery will run that station for the whole 24 hours. So another thing to consider.
And the other thing too, Tom mentioned something very important. Some of the jobs really need to be two-person jobs. They're unsafe to do by themselves, especially in the middle of the night, especially with people that aren't used to it. So we have always made all the maintenance of turning on, turning off, refueling the generator has to be two people. Just
Very
for that
good.
simple purpose.
Same with climbing. Make sure you got a spotter on the ground.
Yeah. So
do not climb temporary erected towers.
Oh,
Last year was the fourth year in a row when we've had a fatality during field day from climbing temporary towers.
Well, our temporary towers are usually on trailers and they have outriggers. So
different story. But I mean, the temporary ones that
by the way, there's a way you can avoid the climbing altogether. I designed and made a hinged boom to mast clamp for our tribander so that the tower is leaning over like this when it's stowed. You could put the tribander on there, and then when you raise it, it just goes up like this. Nobody has to climb.
Yeah.
Yep. With all the self or semi-self erecting, you get out of that business of needing to be up there. Also, if you remember to put two halyards on that bad boy, you can put up any wire antenna you want. You can change them as often as you have the energy for, and nobody has to get even a foot off the ground.
And if you're in the part of the country where you have contacts in two directions, a lot of contacts in two directions, you can put a tagline on the on the reflector end of of a little tri-bander or something and just swing it around. You don't necessarily need a rotator. Okay, it's 7:20.
Yep. So just a reminder, if you go through the whole presentation, find a local group, think about joining them. If your group has not already done it, make sure you mark your information on the ARRL locator so other hams in your area can find you. And I will be 2 Bravo from West Virginia, so I'll be 2B WV. I'll be operating CW, single sideband, and FT8, FT4.
All right. And Anthony, thank you for all the work you put into both the presentation and the links. Those links are just a tremendous resource for people who can they can go down at their own convenience and chase down any particular subject. So thanks for that.
Thank you both for the work you put in on this. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
We're glad you guys are here, and we hope everybody enjoys field day. Remember, have fun is the first rule.